subtract a certain amount of light from that value because you don't agree with it. Depending on which shooting mode you're in, the camera will either change the aperture or the shutter speed to let in more or less light. Another easy way to manipulate the exposure setting is with the auto exposure lock button. Now, under normal operation, the camera continually updates the exposure settings whenever the scene appears to get brighter or darker. Most of the time, that's exactly what you want the camera to do. But sometimes you don't want it to change the settings. By holding down the auto exposure lock button, you can freeze the current exposure settings where they are so they won't change when you reframe your shot. You should be warned, though, that with the default setting, the exposure lock button will also lock the focus at the same time. I don't think that's such a good idea because focus and exposure don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. So if you want to change the default mode, and I suggest that you should, go to Custom Setting menu number F4 and choose AE Lock Hold. As you'll see later in the DVD, this will also be an important setting when it comes to shooting better quality movies. Now, let's take a closer look at ISO on the D90. ISO is a measurement of how sensitive the camera is to light. The higher the setting, the better the camera will be for shooting in low light. But that comes at a price. When you use a higher ISO, you are electronically amplifying the signal that is being generated by the CMOS image sensor. And the more the signal is amplified, the lower the picture quality will be. For best results in most situations, you should keep your ISO on a low setting. The ISO can be changed by pressing the ISO button and rotating the main command dial. ISO sensitivity can be set between 200 and 3200. For special situations, ISO sensitivity can even be raised above 3200 to high 0.3, which equals ISO 4000, high 0.7, which equals ISO 5000, and high 1.0, which equals ISO 6400. At the other end of the scale, you can go below ISO 200 to low 0.3, which equals about ISO 160, low 0.7, which equals about ISO 125, and low 1.0, which equals an ISO of about 100. On the D90, ISO 200 ought to be your normal setting, and you should only raise it when absolutely necessary. Obviously, sharp focus is a critical aspect of taking great photographs. With point-and-shoot cameras, you never have to think about focus. But with an SLR, you have total control over focus for really professional results. But it takes a little effort and some skill. The D90 lets you choose either autofocus or manual focus via this switch on the front of the camera. When the switch is in this position, you must do all the focusing yourself by turning the barrel of the lens. Flipping the switch to the AF position puts the camera into autofocus mode, and now it will focus automatically when the shutter button is pressed halfway. In fact, you actually have 3 different choices for autofocus mode. When you hold down the AF button on the top of the camera and turn the main command dial, you can cycle through the choices: Auto Select, Single Servo, and Continuous Servo. So how do they differ? In single servo mode, the camera sets the focus only once, when the shutter button is first pressed halfway, and then stays locked regardless of whether the camera or the subject moves. This mode is best for landscapes, posed portraits, or any other stationary subjects. In single servo mode, the shutter won't release until the lens has finished focusing. In continuous servo mode, the camera continually adjusts the focus as long as the shutter button remains pressed halfway down. Not only is this the best mode for moving subjects, especially sports, it's usually the best choice for all situations. The third mode, Auto Select, is a hybrid of the other two. In this mode, the camera decides which of the other two modes to use, depending on what it thinks you're shooting. I don't recommend this mode because the results can be unpredictable and hard to control. So let's go back to continuous servo and choose it as the focus mode because it's the setting I recommend for almost all of your photography. But we're not ready to start shooting yet. Now that you've selected the autofocus mode, there's another decision that needs to be made. You also have to tell the camera which area of the frame you want the camera to focus on. For example, in this shot, do we want the camera to focus here, here, or just let it decide automatically which is best? The part of the frame that the camera focuses on is called the active autofocus point. There are 11 autofocus points on the D90. And whatever is behind the active focus point, or points, is what the camera is going to focus on. Now you can either let the camera select the active focus point automatically, or you can choose it yourself. And that's what I recommend you do. Otherwise, you are giving up control over where the camera is going to focus. Keep in mind that the camera doesn't know what you're taking a picture of, so how will it know where to focus if you don't tell it? There are 4 options for autofocus area mode on the D90, but you've got to go into the menus in order to change the setting. There is no external button on the camera body for setting the autofocus area mode. But that's okay, because this is a setting that you probably won't change very often. First, press the menu button and navigate to Custom Setting menu number A1. Here are the 4 choices. Single point offers the most precise control, and this is the mode that I recommend you use 100% of the time. With this mode, the camera will focus on the part of the picture that is directly behind whichever one of the 11 focus points that you choose. You can easily change the active focus point at any time by making sure the focus selector lock is in this position, and then using the arrow buttons to highlight a different focus area with the multi-selector. I like this mode because it gives me exact control over which part of the frame I want to be in focus. I don't have to worry that the camera is going to focus on something I didn't intend. You can think of it as being like crosshairs in a gun sight. I put the focus point over the target, and then the camera will focus on it. It's that simple. The other options, dynamic area, auto area, and 3D tracking, don't provide the precise control necessary for taking creative photographs. If you let the camera decide on its own, it might be wrong as often as it's right, especially when the subject isn't dead center in the middle of the frame or the closest object to the camera. As you see, accurate and creative focusing involves more skill than just pointing the camera and letting it do all the work. If you try to get away with that kind of approach, you'll be very disappointed with the results. I encourage you to get out and practice. Experiment with the different settings. Try tracking moving targets like cars, kids, and pets. The more you practice, the better you'll get. Most light sources are not 100% pure white, but have a certain color temperature expressed in degrees Kelvin. The human eye adapts very quickly to these color temperature variations, so the differences are nearly imperceptible. But your camera isn't that smart. You can help avoid results like this or this by selecting the correct white balance setting on your camera and thus giving your images more accurate color reproduction. The D90 has 9 different white balance settings to choose from. Now, as we saw earlier, the mode can be selected by holding down the white balance button while rotating the main command dial to cycle through the choices. Or it can be set with the shooting menu. Let's use the menu this time. Automatic is the simplest setting to use and, not surprisingly, offers the least amount of control. Out of all the white balance choices, this is the one you shouldn't ever use because it provides the most inconsistent results. Incandescent can sometimes be the best setting if you are shooting indoors under regular household lighting. Fluorescent is designed to be used when your primary light source is ordinary fluorescent lighting that has a slightly greenish cast to it. Direct sunlight is for shooting outdoors on sunny days. Flash is almost always the best choice whenever you're shooting with either the built-in flash or an external flash. Cloudy can be used for shooting on overcast or mostly cloudy days. Shade is designed for use outdoors when the main subject is in the shade. K, or choose color temp, lets you specify an exact color temperature in degrees Kelvin for the white balance. You can choose from 31 temperature settings that range from 2500 K to 10,000 K. But unless you have a thorough understanding of white balance, you should probably avoid using this mode. Preset Manual is the final choice, and it's the one I recommend that you use most of the time, because it offers the only way to set the camera's white balance accurately. Why? Because it's the only one that actually measures the color temperature of the current lighting situation and adjusts the camera to match it. If you use automatic, the camera is just making an educated guess. If you use one of the other presets, you're just putting the white balance value in the right ballpark. You aren't actually setting the camera for the exact lighting conditions as they truly are at that time and location. Do all cloudy days have the same look? No. Does a sunny day have the same color of light at noon as it does at 6 in the evening? No. That's why I almost always set my white balance manually. I'm going to show you how to set a custom white balance with the D90. And it's so easy to do that I hope you get in the habit of doing it every time you go out to shoot. And then again when you move to a new location or when the lighting conditions change. It's not unusual for a professional photographer to set a custom white balance several times a day. First, place a white card under the same lighting that will be used for the subject of your photograph. Even a piece of bright white photocopy paper will work. Next, set the exposure mode to aperture priority. Press down the white balance button and rotate the main command dial until preset is displayed. Release the white balance button briefly and then press it down again and hold it for a couple of seconds. The preset icon will start to blink. Now frame up the white card so that it fills the viewfinder, making sure that the card is lit by the same light as the subject, and press the shutter release button. No photo will be taken, but the camera will measure the color temperature of the light striking the card and adjust the white balance to match it perfectly. If the camera was able to get a good white balance, good will be displayed on the control panel. And now you're ready to start shooting with a white balance that's perfectly matched to the current lighting situation. Now, how long did that take? 15 seconds? That's a lot easier than trying to fix your pictures later on the computer. The D90 simplifies flash photography by coming equipped with a built-in pop-up flash. Now, in some of the point-and-shoot modes, the flash will pop up automatically